I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
At this year's San Diego Comic-Con, Marvel shocked fans when they capped off their jam-packed Hall H panel with a major announcement. Oscar-winning actor Mahershala Ali would be taking on the role of Blade in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In a sense, it was an appropriate way for Marvel to celebrate both their recent record-breaking victory of Avengers Endgame and a unified 23-movie franchise that has collectively grossed over $22 billion worldwide, by coming full circle with the Marvel character that essentially launched the modern comic book movie renaissance. The first two films were a rousing success, ushering in a newfound passion for the character and a combined $286 million global box office. The third film, Blade Trinity, however, was a troubling mess from start to finish and ended its box office run with a lower tally than either of the previous efforts and a sour critical reception. So we have to ask, what the f*** happened to this movie? The Blade movie trilogy may have not finished on a high note, but its beginning was undeniably strong. In 1998, comic book fans had barely recovered from the double disappointment of Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin and the adaptation of Todd McFarlane's Spawn. It was long before Tony Stark would build his first suit of Iron Man armor, and Captain America picked up the bulletproof shield in Marvel's movies, even before Professor Xavier's team of mutants made their live-action debut, and before Tobey Maguire went swinging through Manhattan in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. And suddenly, an obscure character from Marvel's comic archive slashed his way onto the big screen, in a big way. Originally conceived by writer Marv Wolfman and artist Gene Colan as a secondary character in Marvel's 1970s comic Tomb of Dracula, the vampire hunter Blade was part of a slate of properties Marvel tried turning into feature films during the 1990s. Rapper LL Cool J was originally interested in the lead role, and writer and lifelong comic fan David Goyer was developing the movie with Juice director Ernest Dickerson when the project landed at New Line Cinema. Meanwhile, actor Wesley Snipes was still hot off movies like Demolition Man and Passenger 57. He had become frustrated with the progress of a Black Panther movie he was making at Columbia, and he connected with Goyer's Blade script when he read it. An accomplished martial artist himself, Snipes was intrigued by the idea of a Hong Kong-style action movie set in the vampire world. He would also co-produce through his Eamon Roth Films company, and Blade had found its star. Dickerson was eventually replaced by director Stephen Norrington, whose only prior feature credit was a low-budget sci-fi horror movie called Death Machine that impressed the New Line producers. Dickerson would later tell the New York Times that he felt he was dismissed because the producer saw his Damon Wayans Adam Sandler action comedy Bulletproof and thought he had completely lost his street cred. Released in August of 1998, the movie Blade introduces the titular character, whose mother was bitten by a vampire while pregnant. She gave birth to Eric Brooks, a half-human, half-vampire, who possesses enhanced speed and strength, but is immune to sunlight. As an adult, going by the name of Blade, he uses these abilities in a personal mission to travel the world and eradicate the vampire menace. Known among his enemies as Daywalker, Blade is assisted by irritable friend and mentor, Whistler, played by Chris Christopherson, and Boucher writes hematologist Karen Jensen, who tries to find a cure for Blade's increasing vampire urges. Instead, she accidentally invents a formula that makes bloodsuckers violently explode, which is still a bonus. Blade carves his way through a secret society of vampires on a hunt for Stephen Dorff's unruly villain Deacon Frost, who plans to summon an ancient blood god and take over the world. From the opening scene, drenched in blood and attitude, Blade established itself as something audiences had never witnessed before. A satisfying dark superhero movie with an R rating and an African-American leading man. The kinetic blend of vampire horror and martial arts carnage proved to be a hit with the crowds. On a budget of $45 million, Blade earned $131 million at the worldwide box office, and then made a mint on home video. Wesley Snipes further staked his place as an action star and found his first franchise. The success of the movie convinced Hollywood that superheroes were indeed viable material for feature films, and Blade inadvertently built the foundation for the future of comic book movies. New Line and Marvel quickly set a sequel into motion, with Goyer again providing the script, while bringing in mimic director Guillermo del Toro to take over for the departing Stephen Norrington. This time around, Blade would face carriers of the Reaper virus. a new kind of blood-sucking mutation so dangerous to both humans and vampires that it necessitated a tenuous alliance with his hated enemies. In Blade 2, released in March 2002, Snipes returned to the trademark leather trench coat and wraparound shades as the Daywalker, who finds himself paired with the Blood Pack, an elite team of vampires that was originally assembled to kill Blade. Together, they managed to put aside their differences just long enough to eliminate the rapidly spreading Reaper virus before it can infect the entire globe. Del Toro changed the entire aesthetic of the series with the second movie, swapping out the cold blue hues of the first Blade with warmer earth tones. He also amped up the sequel by injecting it with more of, well, pretty much everything. More horror, more grotesque creature effects, more gleefully over-the-top slaughter, and more biting humor. Much of it derived from the tensions between the returning Whistler and Blade's new sidekick, Scud.
No, man, it's Scud. Scud like stud, Scud.
Whatever.
And the conflict between Blade and the antagonistic Blood Pack leader, Reinhardt, played by Ron Perlman. The spiky banter and exaggerated visceral action proved to be another successful combination, propelling the $54 million sequel to a worldwide box office total of $155 million. Unsurprisingly, another Blade movie was immediately pushed into the production pipeline. When Del Toro passed on the third Blade to make Hellboy, German director Oliver Hirschbiegel was considered as a replacement, but instead moved on to the World War II film Downfall. Yes, the one that spawned all those angry Hitler memes. The directing job ultimately landed with the series screenwriter David Goyer, who had just made his feature debut directing Snipes in a little-scene drama called Zigzag. An initial concept for the third movie would have been a twist on Richard Matheson's classic story, I Am Legend, with Blade trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic world where the vampires won. But the idea was scrapped due to budget concerns, so the story switched to something more traditional, where the Daywalker would face the most famous mythical vampire of all, Dracula himself. This time, Blade will be assisted in his mission by an underground network of vamp killers called the Night Stalkers. The group will be led by Hannibal King, another character from the old Tomb of Dracula comics who had also joined Blade in various Marvel comic series from the early 90s. A former vampire who was cured, King would now be played in the movie by actor Ryan Reynolds. While his casting makes perfect sense now, back then it seemed like an odd choice given that Reynolds was mostly known for his snarky comic delivery in Van Wilder, and the TV show Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place. But he demonstrated his commitment to the role by getting into ridiculous physical condition. Joining the battle against bloodsuckers would be Jessica Biel, best known at the time from the TV series Seventh Heaven, but also fresh off starring in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. Her character was initially intended to be a Van Helsing descendant also pulled from the Tomb of Dracula comics, but was altered to avoid confusion with the Hugh Jackman Van Helsing movie that was in production at the time. Instead, Biel will bring her action-ready physique to play an original character named Abigail Whistler, the daughter of Christopherson's character, born out of wedlock sometime after his own family was murdered by vampires. Hey, Whistler Scott needs too. Dominic Purcell, who had starred in the short-lived Fox TV series John Doe, was cast as Dracula. Goyer filled out the rest of the main cast with unexpected actors known more for comedy and drama than action or horror. Parker Posey, John Michael Higgins, Natasha Lyonne, Patton Oswalt, and for some extra muscle on the side of the bad guys, wrestler Triple H would make his feature acting debut as a beefy vampire henchman. Not long after, rumors began to surface that everything wasn't exactly sunny on set, with star Wesley Snipes engaging in some intense method acting. At San Diego Comic-Con in July 2004, several months before the movie's release, only Goyer, Biel, and Reynolds were present to create buzz for Blade Trinity among the hardcore fans at the con. The director and stars were diplomatic, addressing the rumors surrounding Snipes and his approach, with Reynolds saying, "There's a bit of Blade in Wesley, and a bit of Wesley in Blade." Reynolds did claim that the method style worked for the movie's benefit, drawing a distinction between Blade's stoic nature and King's sarcasm.
Darkcore, trip-hop, whatever kids are listening to these days. Me, I'm more of a David Hasselhoff fan, you know?
As Reynolds said, it helped so much. I mean, every time I would say something absolutely fucking ridiculous, he would just look at me with that stone-cold look like he was gonna turn me into ass pudding. The dynamic created itself. Goyer simply said, "It's just the way he works. It's his process. He could be completely different when the film is done. But on the 3 Blade films, he was Blade. On and off the set. More on that in a minute." Blade Trinity opened on December 8, 2004. The movie begins with Parker Posey's melodramatic vampire villainess Danica Talos searching for Drake, aka Dracula, the first vampire. Having found the powerful master of all bloodsuckers hibernating in a Syrian temple, she returns with him to America, where she then publicly frames Blade for killing a human. Believing Blade to be a homicidal maniac, a federal task force locates a secret base of operations and storms the building, capturing Blade and killing his old colleague Whistler in the process. While Blade is held helpless in federal custody, Danica and her Fang gang arrive with ill intent. But before they can eliminate the dazed Daywalker, archery expert Abigail Whistler and trigger-happy Hannibal King come to his rescue, shooting arrows and big bolt holes through just about everyone in their way. Begrudgingly, Blade teams up with this sleeper cell of vampire-fighting Night Stalkers, who have been developing a biological weapon to rid the world of their toothy enemies. While the heavily armed trio starts systematically dismantling the vampire's network of human familiars trying to lure Danica's plan, Drake appears and wounds Hannibal, then leads Blade on a lengthy chase before escaping. Later, as Blade and Abigail discover a warehouse full of the vampire's food source for the post-apocalypse, Drake infiltrates the Night Stalker headquarters and butchers most of the team before returning to his stronghold with the injured Hannibal. Blade and Abigail descend on Danica's downtown skyscraper to rescue their comrade, dust all the bloodsuckers, and destroy Drake once and for all. Upon release, Blade Trinity was immediately greeted with a chilly critical reception and underwhelmed fan response. The sequel suffered in the shadow of what came before. Compared to the first two chapters, Blade Trinity looked and felt more like a TV movie, with a scattered and occasionally nonsensical story and action sequences presented with clumsy staging and hyperactive editing. Another major shortcoming was that the plot involved the most infamous and deadly vampire of all time, but his presence is barely consequential. Rather than illustrate what a major threat Drake is, the movie instead just shows him expressing irritation with Dracula-themed food products and sexual paraphernalia. Later, he runs away from Blade for no apparent reason and literally escapes by threatening an infant. While the movie's finale is a protracted sword fight between Blade and Dracula, retreading the first movie's climax, none of this really springs to mind when considering one of the most iconic horror creatures of legend. Oh yeah, and the movie also had vampire dogs? Moving on. On the upside, Goyer did finally get a chance to include the human blood bag concept that was cut from the first movie, where, in a deleted scene, Deacon Frost explains how his kind would survive in a world where everyone is a vampire, by storing up refrigerated people for snacking on later. Makes perfect sense. While many viewers thought Abigail and Hannibal were the best parts of Blade Trinity, particularly Reynolds' bottomless bucket of sharp one-liners,
I ate a lot of garlic. And I just farted. Silent but deadly.
it was readily apparent that their inclusion was intended to springboard a Night Stalkers movie. In fact, both actors confessed in interviews that they had signed for a Night Stalkers spin-off, but not a Blade 4. They may have provided some high points of the movie, but the overriding result was that the Daywalker felt like a secondary character in his own series. With a budget of $65 million, Blade Trinity was the most expensive of the trilogy, but had the lowest overall gross, with $128 million worldwide. The anemic box office performance seemed to put a stake in future Blade movies, but the story certainly didn't end there. In April of 2005, Variety reported that Wesley Snipes had filed a wide-ranging lawsuit against New Line Cinema and David Goyer, seeking more than $5 million. Allegations included contract violations, claiming that the director and script were forced on the star, as well as a seemingly valid complaint that the movie's purpose was to set up other characters for their own spin-off. Snipes also targeted Goyer as a disastrous choice to direct, blaming him for the film's quality and sluggish box office, while also accusing him of racial bias. A mere 2 days later, Spin magazine writer Chris Perry published his own account of a visit to the Blade Trinity Vancouver set, and seemed to corroborate rumors of Wesley Snipes as a key source of the production's problems. Perry found a sense of solidarity among the cast and crew, who were forthcoming in their confirmation of the actor's method, style, and challenging behavior. Many claim that Snipes remained in his trailer for most of the filming process, leaving his regular Blade stunt double Clay Fontenay to handle much of the action, and also step in for any shot that didn't require a close-up. Snipes also supposedly relied on his assistant to communicate with everyone on set, and referred to his co-stars as that cracker and that girl. The crew made it clear that the actor wasn't really happy with anything about the movie, and responded by refusing to show up to work unless it was absolutely necessary. At one point during Perry's visit, Goyer even frustratingly commented on the need to CGI Snipes onto his stand-in's body during post-production. While scenes in the final product were clearly edited around Snipes' apparent absence on set, there doesn't appear to be explicit examples of CG face swapping. However, the very last scene of the movie looks like Exhibit A in that regard. A still image of Snipes lying on an autopsy table when his clearly superimposed eyes eerily open, followed by quick shots of his lookalike rising and beating up everyone in the room. Years later, in a 2012 interview with AV Club, Patton Oswalt spilled even more dirt from his time on the troubled Blade Trinity set, further substantiating previous claims. Oswalt states that Snipes completely stayed in character, spending the majority of the time in his trailer smoking weed and only appearing on set for close-ups, which allowed Reynolds and the cast to come up with extra jokes to shoot without Snipes present to react. Oswalt also stated that Snipes physically attacked Goyer at one point, prompting the director to ask local bikers to come to the set and pretend to be his security. This led the actor to sit down with Goyer and suggest that he quit, calling him detrimental to the movie. Goyer supposedly responded by saying, "Why don't you quit? We got all your close-ups, and we could shoot the rest with your stand-in." Oswalt says, that freaked Wesley out so much that for the rest of the production, he would only communicate with the director through post-it notes, and he would sign each post-it note from Blade.
He would only answer to Blade!
The Blade, yeah.
After Blade Trinity hit theaters, Snipes found himself in some well-publicized legal trouble for tax evasion, and spent a few years in federal prison while his post-Blade career traveled on a predominantly direct-to-video trajectory. In a Vice interview from August 2018, he uniformly refuted all claims of his method style and any other questionable conduct during the filming of Blade Trinity. Further comments made it clear that he had wanted to focus on more dramatic material instead of making a third Blade movie, stating that the studio had pressured him with an ultimatum and a threat of recasting the character he originally brought to life. But Snipes insisted he had no bad blood with anyone involved in the trilogy, and expressed interest in returning to the role of Blade, justifiably skeptical that anyone else could ever effectively embody the character. Goyer did attempt to revive the Blade character on the Spike TV series in 2006, with Kirk Jones, aka rapper Sticky Fingers, taking over vamp dusting duties. The show lasted a single season, and Goyer then shifted his focus towards DC Comics characters, going on to write the Dark Knight trilogy, Man of Steel, and Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. A Night Stalker spin-off obviously never happened, and Jessica Biel went on to pepper her comedy and drama filmography with other action movies like The A-Team and the remake of Total Recall. And Ryan Reynolds shot to stardom after Blade Trinity, and kept making comic book movies with Green Lantern, R.I.P.D., and of course, his pet project turned global blockbuster, Deadpool. As for Blade, the character is now home again. 15 years after his last movie sliced its way onto screens, Marvel reacquired rights to the character in 2013, but the pieces only came together recently when Mahershala Ali contacted the studio with a specific request to play the character, which MCU honcho Kevin Feige was more than happy to oblige. There will undoubtedly be some fan resistance to a new actor portraying a character that was already so memorably and expertly personified by Wesley Snipes. Ali has some big shoes to fill, but the former Daywalker himself is giving his blessing and stamp of approval, with a statement from Snipes saying, "Although the news comes as a surprise, it's all good. Such is the business of entertainment. Much peace to the MCU crew, always a fan. Honor and respect to the Grandmaster Stan. Congratulations and salam to Mahershala Ali, a beautiful and talented artist whose expressions I look forward to experiencing for many years to come." His former alter ego might have reacted less delicately.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
However, it could be a while before audiences see the new Blade turning his fanged foes into ash. At Comic-Con, director Scott Derrickson described his upcoming Doctor Strange sequel as horrific and the first scary MCU movie, which sounds like a prime opportunity to introduce supernatural beings like vampires, along with the guy who kills them. But Feige downplayed the possibility in a later interview, commenting that Blade likely won't be a part of the current Phase 4 plans. One thing we can expect is that the new version will abandon the hard R rating of the previous Blade trilogy for a more audience-friendly PG-13 to align with the overall tone of the current Marvel movies. It also won't have Snipes' unique blend of physicality and coolness, but by now Marvel has made it increasingly clear that they want to subvert audience expectations, discarding what came before in favor of presenting something different with their characters. Time will tell how Ali's take on the Daywalker will compare to the previous incarnation when Blade gets a chance to stand among the heavy hitters of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Until then, we'll have the cool, the wild, and the weird that is the original Blade trilogy. We'll leave it up to you to decide which is which.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo remains an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.